stabbing, shooting, cock and ball torture. These are just some of the war crimes committed by the protagonist of the Yakuza games, and I love it. Between fighting hot naked guys and doing some other questionable stuff, the Yakuza or the Like a Dragon franchise is known for its combat, and a huge part of that combat are these so-called heat actions, which are these crazy over-the-top takedowns you can perform during fights. By using the heat gauge, which you can feel by simply fighting your enemies, these actions canonically don't kill their victims, which they most definitely do. Like, ain't nobody surviving this shit, bro. Heat actions also work differently from normal game takedowns. As long as you feel the heat gauge and meet certain requirements like being near an object or holding a specific weapon, you can perform a heat action, which means that you can spam them over and over. Granted, a heat action does less damage the more you use it, but that doesn't really matter due to the sheer number of them you can perform. And there are a lot of them. Most are pretty easy to execute, but you'll have some where you need to meet very specific requirements, so you won't see them as often. I usually went out of my way to try different ones and see the animations, which is so worth it. Most of the heat actions are so well choreographed and have so much style. You're technically supposed to play as humans, but you quickly realize that isn't the case at all, which actually just makes it better. RGG Studios said fuck realism and produced the cleanest animations known to man. The heat actions just follow the rule of cool, and goddamn does it work well. The way you acquire heat actions is also very similar in most of the mainland Yakuza games. The protagonist will see somebody getting beaten half to death and get inspired by it, coming up with moves that had nothing to do with what just happened. The absolute best way this was done was probably in Yakuza 4 and 5, where they start recording it on the little phone and writing a blog about it. These heat actions were not always the same though, and there was quite a lot of variety between them. You could go from the most vile, brutal and inhumane thing imaginable to the goofiest shit you've ever seen. Also, the animations are very different depending on which game you're playing. Yakuza 0 probably has my favorite ones, where Rush gives you these fast, boxer-like heat actions, Beast makes you fucking invincible, and Brawler gives you a big variety of both slow and fast heat actions. And that's not even mentioning Majima, my beloved. This guy just oozes swag with every heat action he does. He has Thug, where he kills, Slugger, where he kills yet again, and the best one, that has very few heat actions, but the quality is off the charts. And yes, here he also kills a lot. If we keep going chronologically in order, the next game would be Yakuza Kiwami, which is very similar to Zero in terms of heat actions. Yakuza 0 is a prequel, but it was made in 2017, whereas Kiwami, which is technically a sequel, was made in 2016. So Zero reused a lot of heat actions, hence why most of them are the same. The biggest difference here though is that you can't play as Majima, which is a tragedy, but at least you'll still be able to perform his iconic heat actions as Kiryu. Yakuza Kiwami also had these finishers you could perform when the enemy was at low health, and these aren't really heat actions, but they function pretty much the same way with the same button prompt. This mechanic was removed in the next game though, Yakuza Kiwami 2. Here they also removed the different fighting styles, which instead got replaced by the new singular combat style. You'll also see that this was the first game to have the new Dragon engine. Well, it's technically not the first, but it is if you're going chronologically through the games like you should do. Anyway, this meant that the graphics were totally different than before, and the environment and cutscenes look really great. This engine in general went more for the realistic look, and especially shined when it came to the nighttime with all the reflections and shit. Same goes for the heat actions that were still so fucking cool. They were still as impactful, and there was a ton more of them, and even old ones came back updated for the new engine. In this game, Kiryu was still a gruesome killer. They went all in on the brutality of some of these heat actions, man. Also, they added new heat actions you could perform, but the difference here was that random pedestrians could help you out if enemies were close to them. This gave you a couple new heat actions, all of them being on the goofy side. You could acquire these different heat actions by meeting those people in sub-stories, which I think is such a good idea. Like, this should be a mechanic in every Yakuza game, cause it gives you so much more incentive to explore. Overall, this game had awesome heat actions, some of the best in the series. The heat action quality was really on top here, which can't really be said for the next 3 games, Yakuza 3, 4, and 5, where the overall quality decreased quite a lot, especially in 3, where a lot of animations look pretty stiff and kind of floaty. Just remember that these games are the remastered versions of their PS3 games, while games like Yakuza 0 and Kiwami came after, so a dip in quality is to be expected. Yakuza 3 did still have a lot of great heat actions, but they were just hidden in the pile of garbage ones. Yakuza 4 did get better though, and the variety increased by quite a lot since you could now play as 4 characters, them being Kiryu like usual, Akiyama who had a battle style consisting of only kicks, which led to a lot of unique heat actions, Saejima, who I was most conflicted about. He could either have the greatest heat actions in the game or straight up doo-doo. And finally Tanimura, who had the most unique heat actions in this franchise, doing a lot of grabs and bomb breaking. A shame he never appeared or got mentioned ever again after this game. Then we get to Yakuza 5, which was also a remaster of a PS3 game, but significantly higher in quality than the previous two. And this was probably the goofiest Yakuza game in terms of its combat. They just decided to give every single character a superpower. Like, him being able to do this makes zero sense. But I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Who cares when it's so fun? In this game, Kiryu, Akiyama, and Saejima returned. Tanimura was yeeted off the franchise and instead replaced with a new character, Shinada the Goat, who was also never mentioned again after this game. This series really does have a habit of wasting amazing characters, huh? Anyway, Tanimura specialized in weapons, so his heat actions reflected that, which wasn't really my thing, but the other 3, great heat actions. They improved the animations and added a ton of new heat actions. A lot of them had to do with the new superpower mechanic. So the heat actions were really out there in terms of creativity. If we keep going by the order, the next game should be Yakuza 6, which technically came out before Kiwami 2, so this was actually their first time working with the Dragon engine, and God bless this engine for being so unintentionally funny. This being their first try meant that a lot of the things were unrefined, especially the combat that was pretty The heat actions were still great though. They were really impactful and well choreographed, which was impressive considering how big the change in graphics and mechanics was. Anyhow, after Yakuza 6, the series completely shifted its tone, and instead of being a beat 'em up, they adapted the turn-based combat. The first game to do so was Like a Dragon, which had the new protagonist, Ichiban's Kasuga, and the whole explanation for the turn-based system became that Ichiban is a Dragon Quest obsessed schizo who sees enemies as monsters he has to defeat. Anyway, this meant that there were no heat actions anymore. The combat was good, but man, I would be lying if I said I didn't miss them. The only real substitute here was the freelancer job, where Ichiban could sometimes perform the heat actions from Kiwami 2 and Yakuza 6, but that wasn't enough and didn't really feel the same. Same goes for the ultimate attacks, which were great, but no replacements for the heat actions. But hope wasn't lost, since the game after this, Like a Dragon Gaiden, reintroduced heat actions. This is hands down the best looking Yakuza game to date. I don't know what they did, but this shit is beautiful, man. And the same goes for the heat actions, which were really bright and colorful this time around. In this game, Kiryu got 2 new styles, or technically 1, since the other was just an improved version of the dragon style from Yakuza 6 and Kiwami 2. This dragon style only added like 2 heat actions though, the rest were reused ones. Granted, the new ones looked really great, and even the old ones were really nice to see in this game, especially the ones from the older engine that were now enhanced with the newer graphics and particle effects. The other style that was completely new was the agent style. Here Kiryu got new gadgets he could use in combat. You got the drones, which were almost completely useless. Rocket boots, yes, Kiryu just strapped rockets to his shoes. Man, they were so fun though. The next one was the spider wire, which was mostly used against a big crowd, and yeah, it was also hella fun. And last but not least were the explosive cigarettes, with which you could perform the There were also a couple new heat actions with this style, some where he used the gadgets and others where Kiryu just used his martial arts. And man, this was impressive because this game was made in just 6 months. It's funny how this was supposed to be just a side game that's on a much smaller scale than the main ones, but quickly became one of my favorites. RGG's power of reusing assets really shines here. Anyway, if we still keep going in a chronological order, the next mainline game would be Infinite Wealth, and there's not much to say here about the heat actions either. This game game also continued the trend of being a turn-based JRPG, except this time they brought back Kiryu, who said fuck you to the battle system and turned it back into a beat 'em up, even if it was only for a short while. In that stead, he could perform those finishing hit actions from Yakuza 6 and Kiwami 2. Besides that, there's not much else to say. The combat is great, but the hit actions are still pretty much fully gone. All of those games I've mentioned were all the mainline Like a Dragon games, but there were also a couple of spin-offs, the biggest two being Judgment and its sequel Lost Judgment. And here we got yet another new protagonist, the detective Yagami. Compared to Kiryu, who was more of a brute, Yagami's fighting style was more athletic and fast. In Judgment, he had the crane style, which gave him a lot of hit actions that were oriented towards a group of enemies, and the tiger style, which was used against single opponents and had hit actions reflecting that. The sequel to Judgment, Lost Judgment, proceeded to add two more styles, the snake and boxer style. Snake style was oriented toward enemies with weapons, so the hit actions involved a lot of disarming, but some also one-shotted the enemies by making them give up if they were in a scared state. The boxer style had very few but very impactful hit actions. This game went all out when it came to the hit actions. I mean, the combat as a whole in this game is the best one in the series. They straight up went the Tekken route and let you juggle your enemies for an eternity. Words can't describe how satisfying this combat felt. This shit is just so beautiful, man. Anyway, the only other spin-off apart from that is Like a Dragon Ishin, where we yet again got a new main character. Well, sort of. His face and voice are Kiryu's, but he's another guy called Ryoma from Edo, Japan, which got confusing real fast since a lot of other characters we know came back portraying historical figures, having the same voice actors and models and all. Since this game is about samurais, the hit actions were totally different from the rest of the games. I mean, sure, you had the brawler style, but nobody used that. And why would you when it not only sucks, but you also miss out on using the katana and the gun? This game introduced tons of new hit actions, most being really brutal. If Kiryu canonically doesn't kill, Ryoma sure as hell does. No matter the game, hit actions were always so satisfying to execute. I don't think any of the games would be the same without the hit actions anyway. Well, apart from Like a Dragon or Infinite Wealth. I mean, this is one of the biggest reasons why I love the beat 'em up combat so much. That's also why I'm so excited to see the new hit actions we'll get with the upcoming Majima game. Shit's gonna be wild, man. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe so we can reach 80 billion subscribers by the end of this year. With that said, peace out.